Hi everyone and welcome back. In this video I'm going to show you how to create an empty web API project, and we're going to see briefly the files structure, how things work, and we're also going to talk about Swagger, which is essential to designing, testing and documenting our web APIs. So firstly, let's just create a new project. In the templates, we're going to search for an API, for a web API template. I clicked next, way too fast. Here we can select an ASP.NET Core web API with C# as its language. Let me just give it a name to the project as usual. Most of the things will leave as default. And here, where enable OpenAPI support option here, this allows us to have Swagger in our project. This installs a few packages in order for Swagger to be part of our project, which we will see shortly. And we'll just wait till the project loads. Okay, so here you can see the file structure, which most of the files are usually the same as the ones that we have in an MVC project. So we have the connected services, dependencies. If we click on dependencies and on packages, we see these two packages that we have installed in our project because we selected that enable OpenAPI support. And in the controllers, we can see the weather forecast controller, which is just like a default controller that it's created by itself. In app settings.json, as the same, is the place where we connect the project to the database. And then in program.cs, here on top, we see that we have added a service, the add Swagger gen, which basically generates the Swagger for our project. And a bit below, we specify that only if the application is in development, we use Swagger and we use the Swagger UI, Swagger interface. Here we have the weather forecast class, which is basically just a model, just like the models, which have the structure of the data that we have in our APIs. So here, the controller, we can see here that it's specified to be an API controller. We have the route name there, and this may seem a bit complicated, but basically what this does is just creates some data to return to our API. So here the get method here just creates an object, a weather forecast model object, and it creates a random date, a random temperature, and a random summary, which is one of these weather properties in the array above, and it returns it as an array. So this is just to have some data in our APIs, and if we run the project now, the Swagger will appear. So in our web API projects, we don't have view pages, but we have the Swagger. And Swagger basically is just like a set of tools that helps us a lot to design, to document, and most importantly, to test our APIs when we create them. So this is how Swagger looks like. On top we have the name of our project and the version 1.0 as a default one. And below we have the swagger.json file, which is basically the file that contains the raw format of the APIs that we create. Then we can see a section to select a definition, which basically means that we can select a version of our APIs, because sometimes developers have the need to create different versions of their APIs because they do updates to it or fix stuff. We only have one project, so that's the default one. And down below, we can see the controller name and the get method that we have in that controller name. In that controller, if we click on try it out, and then click on execute. Basically what we are doing, we are simulating an HTTP request to our web API. The HTTP request has 3 parts, which are the request line, which is this get HTTP method here, and the address of our web API. The request has a header section, which is this accept, the type of a text or input that it accepts. And it also has a body section, but it is optional, and in our case we don't have any. And then our web API returns an HTTP response to us. An HTTP response has a status line, which is this 200 code here. And down below we see that it means success. The HTTP response also has a response body section, which is all this data that we created in our controller, that were already created in our controller. And it has also a response header, which is this content type, date, and the server, some information about the HTTP response. Down below we have also the schemas of the application, which are basically just the models. We see here the weather forecast model. So these were created by the project by default, but here usually are stored the models of the data that we create in our project. So they just show the structure of the data that the APIs have. This was it for this video. Just a quick overview of how it looks like when you work with web APIs. In the upcoming videos, you will see how to create more complete web APIs and more examples of them. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.